And on the other side is Encom, led by strong, diverse female character.
Get him out of here.
Get him out of here!
So, just recently, Disney just released its new blockbuster science fiction film Tron Ares into theaters. Disney has had a very strange history with the Tron franchise overall, with the first film coming out in 1982 and in a lot of ways being very ahead of its time. 28 years later, and after the film had built a cult following, Disney released an official sequel called Tron Legacy, which came out during a time when Hollywood is going back to a lot of 80s IPs and digging them up again for revivals. And because of this, Tron Legacy ended up being one of the more faithful and by far better 80s revivals of this period. Although when your competition is stuff like Bayformers, the A-Team, Sony Smurfs, and Bay Turtles, I think it's pretty safe to say you're gonna look like the Citizen Kane of 80s revivals as opposed to those.
Bumblebee, stop lubricating the man.
And now, 15 years after that film came out, we finally gotten the third Tron film, that being Tron Ares. Watch Tron 4 come out in 2045 or something. This film, just like the other Tron films before it, has been met with pretty divisive reception overall. Some fans of the Tron franchise and general audiences have actually said they enjoyed this film, while others have expressed disappointment and compared it unfavorably to the other previous two Tron films. In general, the reception of this film has been pretty mixed, which I guess is par for the course for Tron overall, since the same thing happened when Tron Legacy came out. When that film initially came out in 2010, there were a lot of people that compared it unfavorably to the original Tron, since it takes a very different approach to filmmaking in general. But interestingly enough, while there has been a lot of very legitimate and valid criticism thrown at this film from a variety of angles, both positive and negative, people have also started to take notice that a certain very notorious group of reviewers on YouTube and other platforms have also been talking about this film, when interestingly enough, they've actually never discussed any Tron media before until now. Perhaps more telling though is that this group of reviewers hasn't actually been saying anything about the film itself, but rather one of its main stars, Greta Lee. Greta Lee is a pretty popular Korean actress and is also part of the main cast of this film. However, these reviewers are calling her a quote-unquote woke girl boss and think that she's part of the quote-unquote woke agenda that Hollywood is pushing. It seems they've gotten really hung up on Greta Lee's character in this film and are even calling her the new Rey Skywalker of all things. Wow, it seems like they can't forget about the Star Wars sequels at all. Funny, given the last of the sequels came out in 2019, I think it's time you guys let this go. And there's even been some more on-the-nose comments, like this deleted tweet from Disparo here calling Greta Lee's character a Panda Express girl boss. Wow, all the subtlety just went right out the window there, huh? I'm talking about none other than anti-woke film critics who really don't seem to like Tron Ares, or more specifically, they don't like Greta Lee's character in Tron Ares. Anti-woke film critics are a pretty notorious group of reviewers overall who tend to not really know how to properly criticize film. Rather than actually looking at the things you should look at when criticizing a film, such as storytelling, pacing, characterization, scripting, cinematography, acting, and things like that, they'd rather get mad that the latest Tron movie has an Asian woman in its main cast. Oh no, the horror. I know, right guys? Asian women exist. Whoa, what a total fright. There have been a lot of anti-woke reviews coming out for this movie that have really shown their true colors by just honing in on Greta Lee's character rather than actually saying anything about the film itself. I also find this really funny because Jared Leto is actually the main star of this film, and given how much of a controversial figure he is, you'd think he'd be the first one they bring up when trying to say something negative about the film's cast. But nope, just Greta Lee, cause Asian girl boss, I guess. Wow, really showing your real priorities there, guys. In addition to this, a lot of these reviews just straight up have them admitting they're not even Tron fans at all. Usually within these reviews, they'll admit they didn't either like Tron 1 or Tron Legacy or both films. It ultimately makes what they're doing here even more obvious because they're not reviewing this film out of any sort of passion whatsoever. They're only reviewing it because it's a new and current movie and they're trying to sell their audience on the idea of quote-unquote woke girl bosses ruining Hollywood. Oh boy. So today, let's look at some of these anti-woke grifters reviews of Tron Ares, talk about why they're not really criticizing the film at all, and talk about what real film criticism should look like overall. To start, let's look at a review from none other than the poster child for anti-woke film criticism, that being the Critical Drinker. Drinker has pretty much been the biggest hub of anti-woke film reviews for a while now, and it seems he's doing the same with Tron Ares now. And of course, he took the opportunity here to call the film Tron Ares. Wow, what riveting commentary. Let's see what he had to say in general.
Tron Ares. Sorry, Tron Ares. Actually, no, I'm not sorry because it is arse.
Arse!
Anyway, it's without doubt one of the dumbest, most pointless, and creatively bankrupt movies I've seen all year. And that's up against some pretty stiff competition, believe that. It's a film that feels like it was made with the sole intention of deconstructing the entire franchise, neatly sidestepping and erasing everything that was set up in the previous film.
So the thing is, this film actually doesn't ignore the two previous Tron films whatsoever. In fact, I would actually say one of the strengths of Tron Ares is that it does have a lot of reference for the first two Tron movies. There's a ton of Easter eggs towards the Tron franchise here, and in fact, there's even a scene that was shown in trailers where Jared Leto's character Ares gets to visit the original grid from the 1982 Tron film. In addition to this, without saying too much, we are given an idea as to what Sam and Cora have been doing since the events of Tron Legacy, and they are acknowledged in this film. So really, a lot of threads and elements from previous Tron films actually are followed up on Tron Ares, which is a pleasant surprise.
I mean, I've got plenty of issues with Tron Legacy, but that movie was a goddamn masterpiece compared to this.
Okay, and right here, we already start to see some of the biggest problems with this review. Drinker is not even a Tron fan. He's made this very clear at the start of the video even. Or at the very least, he said here that he didn't really care for Tron Legacy, so why exactly is he even bothering to review Tron Ares? Well, the answer to that is pretty simple. He knows it's a current movie, and as thus, it's a current topic of discussion. He doesn't actually care about this movie, or even really care about reviewing it whatsoever. He knew that simply because this is a current topic of discussion, he wanted to use this movie review as a way to platform his own ideas of all women in film being quote-unquote girl bosses. And also just platform a lot of his other beliefs, which we'll get into here. This is something that's very much a pattern for Drinker, and really a lot of anti-woke grifters overall. That's exactly why Drinker went out of his way to review Cleaner, a movie starring Daisy Ridley that came out earlier this year that nobody actually knew about. This was an incredibly niche and rather unknown and unadvertised Die Hard type movie that was in theaters for a limited release, but yet just because it starred Daisy Ridley, Drinker went out of his way to do a review on it simply because he saw he could use that as a way to platform his own belief that Hollywood is spreading woke propaganda and that girl bosses are killing modern cinema. It's just so shameless and incredibly toothless commentary too. And Drinker is doing the exact same thing here with Tron Ares given how niche of an IP that Tron really is. I guarantee you, if this film didn't star an Asian woman as part of the cast, I don't think Drinker actually would have bothered reviewing it at all. But since he saw a way to try to sell his audience on this idea that girl bosses are ruining Hollywood and that this film has one, he went for it. The grift is absolutely real.
Tron Ares is set sometime after the events of Tron Legacy and centers around the rivalry between two major tech firms. Dillinger Systems, overseen by the grandson of the bad guy from the first movie, because I guess major publicly traded tech corporations operate like royal dynasties in this world, and the position of CEO gets passed from father to son.
Right.
Yeah, that is what happens in this universe, in fact. In fact, that's pretty much what the entire plot of Tron Legacy revolves around in a lot of ways. Kevin Flynn disappears for many years during the events of this film, causing his son Sam Flynn to think that he's gone and also causing him to not really want to inherit his company that his father owns. As a result, he technically is a shareholder with the company, but he doesn't actually operate within it and just plays pranks on them once a year. However, after getting sucked into the grid for himself, just like his dad did previously, he ends up finding out that his dad is perfectly alright. And after experiencing the grid with him and also escaping the grid with a new program named Quora, he ends up inheriting the company again and taking it back. So yeah, that is something that has been established before in the Tron franchise. There is an example of a son taking on a father's company, kind of like a dynasty if you want to compare it to that. I'm not really sure why Drinker is acting like this is a completely unbelievable turn for the Tron franchise. This has already happened before. Honestly, I kind of wonder whether Drinker actually watched Tron Legacy or not, despite the fact that he said he watched it and didn't like it earlier. It seems like he can't even recall basic plot elements from that film for his review of Tron Ares here.
And on the other side is NCOM, led by strong, diverse female character. Guess which one turns out to be the good guys? I mean, I'm pretty sure that strong, diverse female character has a name, but honestly, who gives a fuck at this point?
Oh boy, and here's the beginning of the girl boss narrative from Drinker here. I am genuinely baffled by how many people I've been seeing say that Greta Lee's character in this film is a quote-unquote girl boss. I think if you asked any of these guys what they think a girl boss actually means, they couldn't even give you a straight answer. They've used this term so much to the point of redundancy just whenever they see any female that it feels feels like they just personally don't like. They're already calling Elle Fanning's android character in the upcoming film Predator Badlands a girl boss, even though that film's not even out yet. And they've also called the CEO of Cracker Barrel girl boss before as well.
Sorry, I know people are gonna get mad at me for this, but I bet you if they had an option to give the Yautja help, and they were like, oh, could you put a male presenting synth in there, a male synthetic robot, they would rather there not be any.
This is a tale, a hilarious tale, of a female CEO that simply girl bossed too hard.
You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Where exactly is the correlation between a fictional android from the Predator franchise and the real CEO of the company Cracker Barrel? It really just feels like these guys throw out this term whenever they see a female that they just personally don't like. It's become just as much of a buzzword to them as the words woke or DEI have. And funny enough, if you actually watch this movie, Greta Lee's character, Eve Kim, is 100% not a girl boss. At least if we're assuming the kind of girl boss that they usually talk about, where it's an OP woman that quote-unquote don't need no man, as these grifters often try to say. If you actually watch the film, you can see that Eve Kim actually loses a lot, and funny enough, it's often the main male character, Ares, that comes in to save her. In fact, there are 3 exact times in this film where Ares saves Eve from trouble. Eve Kim is not a girl boss, she's just a normal female character in this film that's looking for the permanence code to try to help humanity with her technology. And if they're just trying to say that she's a girl boss here because she's the leader of NCOM and she's clearly a CEO, is completely flawless and has no problems at all, then funny enough, that's not true either. Eve Kim is a very flawed character, in fact, if you actually watch this movie. She has a lot of insecurity about being the CEO of NCOM and also living up to what she thinks her sister would have wanted for her. Interestingly enough, she simply started designing games at the company and her sister was the one trying to find benefits for humanity. But after her sister passed away, Eve started to feel a lot of insecurity about whether she was actually living up to what her sister and Kevin Flynn would have wanted for her and the company. And that's something she actually grapples with a lot internally throughout this film. She actually does have some depth to her character. So no, Eve Kim is not a girl boss whatsoever. She might not be the deepest character ever, but she does have enough depth and flaws to her to make her a pretty well-rounded female character in general. And also, she does need to get saved by other people, so I don't really see where the girl boss narrative comes in here.
She's just another in the depressingly long list of empty, generic, personality-free, strong female characters churned out by modern-day Disney. And I kid you not, the actress playing her makes Gal Gadot look like Katharine Hepburn by comparison. She drifts through the movie with the kind of blank-faced stare of an NPC that hasn't had its dialogue triggered yet. She runs with all the speed and finesse of an 80-year-old landmine victim, and by the end of the film, I felt like I knew absolutely nothing about her. And to be honest, I was perfectly fine with that.
Wow, really? So you saw none of what I just stated here? You didn't see this stuff about the grief for her sister, and also a lot of her insecurity and feeling like she's not living up to her sister or Kevin Flynn's vision at all? And you also didn't see her have to get saved, I don't know, 3 times by Ares, a male character? At this point though, I guess I shouldn't be surprised. Drinker seems to have the attention span of a plastic spoon here.
Anyway, both corporations are using magical bullshit laser technology to magic things into existence. In the case of strong, diverse female character, she wants to create beneficial things like crops and medical supplies to combat world hunger, while evil white guy wants to create soldiers and weapons to blow stuff up. Because men bad and violent and women good and altruistic.
What? No, where'd you get that idea? In what way did this movie say that all men are bad? The main character is a male. And while you could absolutely say a lot on the actor behind that character, more on that later, it seems like he's actually a pretty competent character here. And he has a pretty interesting arc overall with this whole Pinocchio Frankenstein narrative where he wants to try to figure out what it really means to be human. How is any of this anti-male? Also, why did he single out the fact that Julian Dillinger is white? Ares is a white male too. This film shows a very competent main white male protagonist. I don't really see how it's anti-white male at all. Inevitably, it's very clear Drinker didn't actually watch this movie and is doing the most surface level reading on it he can just based off of the ethnicity of its cast. He's not really talking about how the members of the cast actually fit into the movie, what their roles are like, and how their acting is. Heck, he's not even talking about the plot of the film, which I don't think he even probably remembers because he probably didn't really watch this movie. Go figure.
Because I'm sure in 2025 we really struggle to replicate the mind-boggling complexity of early 1980s computer codes. What are you
you retarded?
When strong, diverse female character manages to get her hands on the code, evil white guy uses the magical bullshit laser to bring Ares and another computer program called Athena into the real world to recover it from her by sucking her into the computer world and then forcefully extracting it from her brain.
I love how he intentionally keeps referring to Julian Dillinger as evil white guy here and Eve Kim as strong, diverse female. He thinks that if he can just say this over and over when referring to these two specific characters throughout the entirety of this review, then he can sell his audience on the idea that that's what these characters are presented as in the film and that's what the story is going for, simply through osmosis of repeating these same terms over and over without actually having to state any specific examples. Because let's face it, either A, Drinker didn't actually watch this film, or B, he knows there's not actually any concrete examples in this film that prove his idea that this is a quote-unquote girl boss narrative, so he just wants to repeat these terms over and over and hope his audience eventually believes them by the end of the review. AKA not actually criticizing this film and simply bringing up the same buzzwords over and over to try to sell his audience on this false idea about it. This is pretty common for grifters overall though, and it's something that Drinker has done a lot before, so it's not surprising to see him do the same thing here.
Fortunately, Ares starts to have second thoughts, disobeys his programming, and goes on the run with strong, diverse female character. So then Athena chases after them and uses the magical bullshit lasers to make one of those giant flying tank things, even though it was many times larger than the building it was created in, so I've got no idea how that was supposed to work, but who even cares? Let's just go with it.
What? Dude, are you really nitpicking the logic of a Tron movie here? The entire point of these movies is that they're fun sci-fi films that still do offer some insight into what the relationship between technology and mankind should look like. The first two films literally start with somebody getting sucked into a computer. Why in the world are you questioning the logic of Tron here? It's clear that Drinker knows that he doesn't really have anything to actually say about this film, so he's just resorting to nitpicking random fantastical elements of it. It's honestly kind of unreal.
There was potential to explore the moral implications of creating AI life forms and how they would even begin to experience our reality when they've never even felt physical sensations before.
What? What are you talking about? That's the entire point of Ares' arc in this film. The entire point of his character is that he's a program who's wondering what it really means to be human. You said at the start here that the film doesn't explore how the programs would adapt to our reality when they haven't even felt physical sensations before, but the thing is, the film does explore that. One of the first scenes we see of Ares, in fact, is him experiencing a rainstorm for the first time, getting to feel the rain on his skin. He's never felt this sensation before and begins to wonder about it and a lot of the other things he's been told about the user world and gradually begins to question his directive that he's gotten from Dillinger. He starts to begin to think for himself and form his own directive. That's the entire point of his character. How did you miss that? I feel like even someone with the slightest sense of media literacy would probably pick up on that, but Drinker just can't get it for some reason.
I mean, how does a physically manifested computer program even function in the real world? Does he have to eat? Sleep? Crap? Is he gonna age? Will he feel pain? Can he be damaged? I don't fucking know because the movie doesn't seem to know either.
I mean, do we really need to know that stuff though? The things that are important about Ares' character in this film is his desire to become human and find his own directive. Why in the world will we care about any of that other stuff? It's incredibly trivial, and again, Drinker is just nitpicking here because he knows he doesn't really have anything to say about this movie. He doesn't have the capability to properly dissect and criticize this film, so he's just throwing out random nitpicks and trying to say it's a quote-unquote girl boss narrative in an anti-white male story. What?
Carefully spelling out every single plot point and event in case for some reason you weren't paying attention. Actually, in retrospect, that was probably a good idea because my attention was definitely wavering towards the end.
I think based on your analysis here was probably wavering the whole time, buddy.
Greta Lee is probably best known for her voiceover work, and that being the case, she should probably stick to it because she doesn't seem capable of making actual facial expressions that I can recognize.
What? What do you mean Greta Lee is only known for voiceover work? She started getting popular first on the television scene with stuff like Russian Doll and The Morning Show. And then after that, she became even more prominent within the world of film for the movie Past Lives, which is often considered one of the greatest films of the 21st century. She was nominated for a Golden Globe for Best Actress for her performance in that film. And she ended up winning Best Actress from the Hollywood Critics Association. How do you think that people don't know who Greta Lee is? movies. More than likely, Drinker himself, which he already kinda gave away here a bit, is only familiar with Greta Lee because of her voice role in the Spider-Verse films as Lila. She has been in a number of live-action shows and films and has been very acclaimed for her work in them, but the thing is, Drinker would actually have to watch something other than mainstream American movies to know that. So, of course he wouldn't realize that because he doesn't go out of his way to watch foreign films or anything like that. He'll only bother to watch major mainstream American films for his YouTube channel. Wow, what a shock. I'll bet this guy has never seen a Kurosawa film or anything by Denis Villeneuve, except for maybe Blade Runner 2049, but I kinda doubt he would understand that either.
On the other hand, Gillian Anderson is completely wasted in a role that demands absolutely nothing from her, and a script that doesn't even seem to know why she's there. She would have made a fucking awesome antagonist, but then who am I kidding? The idea of Disney putting a woman into a villainous role is more absurd than James Gunn being honest about the DCU's chances of success.
Oh, really? Let's test that theory, shall we? Funny enough, even just in the last 4 years, Disney has produced a number of films with female villains. We got Raya and the Last Dragon, Encanto, Turning Red, Disenchanted, Doctor Strange 2, Hocus Pocus 2, Inside Out 2, Deadpool and Wolverine, Moana 2, Thunderbolts, and what do you know, also Tron Ares. This film does have an active female villain in the form of Athena. Now, what was that about Disney not having female villains in any of their modern movies? Overall, Drinker very clearly didn't actually bother to review Tron Ares here whatsoever. His entire purpose of making this video, just like most videos he makes on his channel, was simply to try to spread the idea that woke girl bosses are killing movies. When, if he'd actually watched this movie, he'd realize there aren't any girl bosses here, and there's actually just a story about technology interacting with mankind, just like what Tron has always been about. But of course, Drinker couldn't actually bother to do that because that would get in the way of him saying that every film with a female protagonist is woke propaganda, and trying to sell his audience on that idea as well. Gee, maybe you should have looked at Jared Leto, the big problematic actor in this film, Drinker. But funny enough, Drinker isn't the only one who's made a bad faith review like this with these kinds of talking points. Another person who's also done this is none other than Jester Bell, our favorite anti-woke pick-me girl who looks like the reanimated corpse of a Walmart Karen. God, her eyes are so dead and lifeless, holy crap. Personally, I never really like when I have to talk about Jester Bell because out of all the anti-woke grifters I cover, I personally find her the most obnoxious. She always has an incredibly obnoxious, Karen-like voice. She looks like a zombie who's been dead for about 40 years until a lightning bolt zapped her coffin and brought her back to life, and also she doesn't have an original thought whatsoever in anything she talks about. Funny enough, most of the things she talks about in her videos are just her parroting different points she's heard from other anti-woke reviewers. She's so lazy that she can't even bother to come up with her own talking points on any film. Good example of this is when she basically admitted to copying Film Threat's review of Elio and talking about why it's a bad movie because it didn't follow the rule of thirds.
Now, I heard a review going into this video that also called Elio the worst Pixar movie ever made. And that video really just narrowed in on the animation and how this movie completely abandons basic animation and filmmaking principles. Now, if you have done any sort of filmmaking or filmmaking study at all, as I have done, then you will know this very basic rule, the rule of thirds.
And the first thing they taught us, and if any of you know anything about art, you'll understand what this is, but it's called the rule of thirds. And while watching Elio, throughout 80% of the movie, all the action was in the dead center of the screen.
Stop repeating everything I say!
Which is funny because if she or Film Threat actually knew anything about film theory or Pixar movies in general, they'd probably realize that doesn't really matter at all. Some of the most acclaimed Pixar films don't follow the rule of thirds, like Up, Toy Story 3, Ratatouille, and plenty of others. These guys never have any idea what they're talking about when it comes to media literacy, and it's kind of amazing. But I guess let's see what our favorite soulless Karen has to say about Tron Ares. Oh boy. I'm just gonna let that intro speak for itself. Jester Bell really does not understand just how cringe she always appears, and how cringe her thumbnails generally appeared too.
One trailer this year that actually intrigued me, and that was the trailer for the movie Tron Ares. I thought that was legitimately something that might be decent to watch, and I won't be recording a rant for it. It's just a movie filled with every single negative trope that Hollywood has. It's a bait and switch movie. It is not centered around Jared Leto as a sole protagonist. No. That's not what Tron Ares is. It actually mainly centers around Greta Lee's character, who is the girl boss of this film. Literally, she fills out all the tropes.
Oh boy, here we go again with Jesterbell making the same exact mistake that Drinker did. I guess that's what happens when you parrot your points and you don't actually think about the film you're watching. As stated before, Greta Lee's character is not a girl boss, but also she's not even the main character here. Ares is. And yes, he does have an actual arc in this film too. Like I touched on before, the entire point of his character is him learning to question his directive and think for himself, and also his desire to become human. His desire to learn more about the user world and work with the users within them for a better future for both of them. This is exactly his journey throughout this entire film, him learning to think for himself. So whether you want to admit it or not, he actually does have an arc in this film, and that's pretty clearly laid out too. I guess much like Drinker, you either weren't paying attention, or probably the more likely answer is you just copied all your talking points off of him.
To be fair, Tron hasn't had the best time with critics in the past, and I don't think that it's entirely unwarranted. I've never been able to get into the first Tron. Tron Legacy has some things I really like about it. I was able to watch it the other day.
Wow, yet again, someone admitting they don't actually care about one or more of the Tron movies and aren't really a fan of Tron. Yet they decided to make an entire video about Tron Ares for very obvious reasons that don't actually have to do with reviewing the film properly. Shocker, both Drinker and Jesterbell now completely out of themselves for the reasons why they made the reviews. They aren't Tron fans, they just want to keep pushing this ridiculous idea of the quote-unquote girl boss narrative overtaking Hollywood. It's crazy to me how they don't even try to hide this whatsoever.
But, you know, it's so jarring to go from Tron Legacy, which is, you know, the story of Sam Flynn finding his father who disappeared and reconciling with his father who disappeared and wanting to take on his legacy and having a very optimistic and hopeful ending finally for that character. It was already leaked online. It was already said that they were not going to continue with that story. In fact, they were going to have it so that the company under Sam Flynn failed and got taken over by Greta Lee's character.
What? No! Did we watch the same movie here? Sam Flynn did not fail in this film. They even say right at the start of the film in the intro that he left the company for personal reasons. And because of that, he handed over leadership to Eve Kim and her sister Tess Kim while he was away. That's literally explained in like the first 5 minutes of the film. I just can't believe that it's so obvious that neither Jesterbell nor Drinker were actually paying any sort of attention to this film whatsoever. It's like Jesterbell doesn't have any sort of brain that can retain any kind of memory behind those soulless zombie eyes of hers, and the same thing with Drinker behind his giant forehead. These two are both painfully incompetent critics and really just grifters at the end of the day. They don't actually care about giving you a legitimate assessment of this film. They just want to repeat the same kinds of talking points that have been echoed by anti-woke grifters for a really long time now.
I knew that that is what I was going to get from this movie walking into it. I knew that, but for whatever reason, it's like I wasn't even prepared for the feeling that I would get after having just watched Tron Legacy and the hopeful ending to that movie.
No, it's more like you had your talking points ready for this movie and you knew you wanted to sell your audience on the fact this is a girl boss narrative. You didn't bother to actually review the movie here whatsoever. You're just talking about how this movie is complete girl boss propaganda, how they replace Sam Flynn. Even though, like I said before, the film itself states that didn't happen. He resigned from the company for personal reasons and left her in charge. Nobody replaced anybody here. Oh, but don't worry guys, clearly Greta Lee's character was a completely woke Asian girl boss. Get real.
You are a fool! You are a fool if you think that this isn't a trope in Hollywood these days with all the franchises happening about getting rid of the male character, either demoralizing him, turning him into a depressed person who gave up, regressing that character arc. That's what it essentially is. Destroying the character arc and the character growth from the previous film to give it so that usually a female character can take that growth for herself and take that success for herself.
No, nobody's a fool for not thinking that here. You are a fool for thinking that's the case with every major female character in a Hollywood movie. Like this, either don't realize or don't want to acknowledge that it's not the fact that there's a female character here that's the issue. They'll often try to push this narrative of female characters quote-unquote replacing or superseding older male characters that are totally sad. When, funny enough, there's actually examples of a younger female character working alongside or even outright replacing a older male character that are praised. films. One really good example of this from the past decade is Logan, which funny enough is a movie that I never see these guys bring up when trying to push this narrative. This is a film starring an older version of Wolverine who is incredibly depressed and on his last days because of the adamantium poisoning in his body. And funny enough, there actually is a younger female character who is prominent alongside Logan in this film, that being X-23, who is technically his biological daughter. X-23 is incredibly competent and incredibly dangerous, and in some ways outpaces Logan in this film. And upon Logan's death at the end of the film, she ends up taking on the mantle that he had previously, and she ends up leading a young group of new mutants into a fabled promised land where they can be safe from harm. She ends up fulfilling what the main male character before her was trying to do and continues his vision. So why is X-23 not called a girl boss for living out the legacy of the main male character before her, but Eve Kim is? If you really look at it, both actually do very similar things, except for the fact that Eve Kim is not a fighter whatsoever in this movie. The real truth of the matter is that a strong female character working alongside or even outright replacing a main male character isn't always a bad thing, unlike what these guys often say in regards to the quote-unquote girl boss narrative. A film like Ballerina from this year, which has a strong female character replace the main male character of that franchise, that being John Wick, got good reviews. And funny enough, none of these guys looked at that movie in regards to the quote-unquote girl boss narrative they keep pushing, even though in a lot of ways this film actually fills out a lot of the criteria that they supposedly lay out for what a quote-unquote girl boss movie is. Same thing with the TV show Hawkeye, in fact. Nobody called Kate Bishop, who works alongside Hawkeye in that show and is as equally, if not more powerful than him, a girl boss. This is because Kate is incredibly reckless in this show, and she actually has to learn a lot from Hawkeye himself about how to be a real hero. So really, this kind of narrative isn't actually a bad thing on its own whatsoever. Just like any other narrative device, there's a way to write this sort of thing well and make a well fleshed out character, and a way that might feel kinda tacky and not really that well thought out. Unlike what these guys will often claim, the quote-unquote girl boss narrative, or at least the criteria they give for it, isn't something that's always executed poorly. And it's certainly not always a bad narrative device, unlike what they will try to tell you. Ultimately, girl boss is just a buzzword they use when they see a film that they think might fail or not do so well or not be critically well received, so that they can try to sell their audience on the idea that this film was bad because it had a quote-unquote girl boss in it. Which, again, is exactly why they don't try to do that sort of thing with Logan, Hawkeye, or Ballerina. They know if they did that, a lot of people would start to see through the hypocrisy in a lot of their statements.
That's what it is. And the reason why I think that maybe, Luke Skywalker might be the most prominent example of this, maybe the most high profile, where, he went from being the hopeful character to the depressed person who gave up, and then Rey becomes the person who is going to get to train the Jedi in the future. Apparently, that might be what they're doing in the future Star Wars films.
Wow, yet again, another person comparing Eve Kim of all people to Rey Skywalker. We've now had both Nerd Cookies and Jester Bell do this in a desperate attempt to sell people on their idea about this movie. These people really need to let it go about the Star Wars sequels already. And also, funny enough, they can't seem to understand that The Last Jedi is a deconstruction of different aspects of the mythos of Star Wars. A lot of the anti-woke grifters will often try to spread this narrative that Luke is a sad old man in The Last Jedi, when the thing they often leave out is that Luke has spent a lot of the last few years reflecting on the hypocrisy of the Jedi Order and a lot of the things they did, which, if you watch the Star Wars prequels, and especially the Clone Wars TV show, is very apparent. Especially in the Star Wars Clone Wars TV show, which, funny enough, came out before Disney bought Star Wars. They actually do deconstruct a lot of the more dangerous ideologies surrounding the Jedi Order. What Luke learns on The Last Jedi is to let the past die, something he very literally says a lot in this film. He has an actual arc and realizes that he needs to be the change to better the Jedi Order going forward in the next generation. He's not a sad old man here at all. He's just a man that's had a lot of thought, unlike these grifters, clearly, who, funny enough, can't seem to let go of the past themselves and keep whining about the Star Wars sequels. Funny how that works.
And Luke failed at that. But I want to use it as the John Connor trope because I think that is even more blatant about what this is and what it does to you at the beginning of a film. In Terminator Dark Fate, and I keep forgetting that film.
What do you know, a great example of where Jester Bell got all her talking points from for this video. Funny enough, on her Twitter, none other than Nerd Cookies, the other anti-woke pick-me girl, actually posted about Terminator Dark Fate and tried to claim Tron Ares was gonna be like it. This was before the film came out, mind you, and she was trying to claim that a song on the Tron Ares soundtrack seemed to imply that the film was gonna be placed in a parallel universe like Terminator Dark Fate, which is absolutely hilarious, and by by the way, I completely ratioed her tweet on this by calling her out after the film came out. This is exactly why you don't have your talking points ready before the film comes out, nerd cookies. Be a real critic instead. And yet it doesn't look like Jester Bell is actually taking a hint from how Nerd Cookies was exposed and is just taking all the same talking points from her here. Very unsurprising.
Like, that was one of the things I liked about Tron Legacy. I'm not saying that Tron Legacy is perfect at all. It has plenty of flaws, but I did like his character journey in that movie. I liked him. And they open it up saying that ending, that hopeful ending to Tron Legacy, gone. All the development and growth and optimism gone.
So this is very interesting because if you actually watch Tron Legacy, Garrett Hedlund as Sam Flynn actually isn't the draw in my opinion. And interestingly enough, his arc actually isn't as well fleshed out compared to another arc featured in that film. The by far more fleshed out arc in Tron Legacy, and the one that people often have the most takeaways from, is actually the arc of Kevin Flynn in that movie. Sam Flynn's entire thing basically just boils down to getting sucked into the grid, meeting his father, then deciding to take over the company because he met his father. And also because he found out about the grid. That's fine on its own, but that's not really that in-depth or that nuanced. What is more interesting is Kevin Flynn's arc in this film, where he starts out wanting to create a perfect society within the grid for both programs and users. While doing this, he creates a digital version of himself named Clue to help aid him while doing this exact task. Funny enough though, while trying to create the perfect system, he actually meets a race of beings that manifested within the grid called the ISOs. These beings are by no means perfect, but he does find out he can learn a lot from them because of how fascinating it is that an entire race of people spawn within the grid to begin with. Clue, however, does not want to see these people welcomed into his perfect society since they are far from perfect and has them all eradicated. And essentially, he becomes a fascist dictator within the grid bent on wiping out anything that isn't perfect and could harm his perfect society. Because Clue is a clone of Kevin from before he met the ISOs and before he had a real arc and had his worldview flipped on his head, he's not able to learn and grow at all. Kevin sees this and realizes just how wrong his way of thinking was before and how dangerous it could be taken to this extreme. This causes him to do a lot of self-reflecting and realize that life isn't perfect, and that's kind of the beauty of it. The world around us is full of mistakes and harm, but that's what helps us grow and become better as people. In a perfect society, that just wouldn't be possible, and really, a perfect society doesn't allow for any development or change at all. This is a fact that Kevin has learned to embrace by the end of the film, and that's literalized with him actually embracing Clue, his past mistake, his imperfect self, and embracing that at the end of the film. If Jester Bell had actually watched the movie and paid attention, she might have realized that, but unfortunately she didn't.
And obviously so many franchises have lost money after they went in this direction, so there is no evidence that this direction, this trope that keeps being used, is good for business or good for accolades. And I believe that they will kill their entire industry before they let this thing go, because it's not about money or accolades for them. It's just about keeping on this idea and this message. So if you've watched the beginning of Tron Ares, I just want you to take your daily pill, men. Men are failures and will always fail, and all your favorite male characters will always fail. So take your pill, man.
Wow, holy mic peaking, Batman. She went completely nuts there. Sometimes I feel like my mic is peaking, but she makes me look like a church mouse here. Wow. Also, I actually know how to articulate my thoughts in an intelligent manner, unlike all these anti-woke grifters. I think I'm gonna stop talking about Jester Bell here for now because, quite frankly, she annoys me the most out of any of the anti-woke grifters, and also she's just repeating a lot of the same things that other people have said before. I think we'll move on to look at Clownfish TV's video on Tron Ares, which, interestingly enough, they took a very different angle than the two previous people here. So they actually did review the movie, and they mostly said they felt pretty indifferent towards it. I think the more interesting thing, though, is what happened after their initial review of it. Supposedly, in their words, after they made their initial review, they got bombarded by a bunch of positive reviews of the movie on Twitter. And apparently they thought people were shilling this movie on Twitter and were being paid off by Disney or part of a new X algorithm. No, I am not making this up. Apparently they couldn't fathom that anyone would actually like this movie, that they decided to think that these accounts on Twitter were just bot accounts or part of some movement paid for by Disney. And lo and behold, guess who was labeled as one of these quote-unquote bot accounts who were quote-unquote shilling for Disney? You guessed it, me! I think I've made it pretty clear in the past how much of a fan I am of the Tron franchise in general, so I found it really funny that I was accused of being a quote-unquote bot account shilling for Disney. Let's see what Clownfish TV had to say about this in general.
Something very strange is happening online with Tron Ares. It seems like there's a concerted effort to stomp on any negativity around this movie. I mean, it feels like Star Wars all over again. It's very, very weird.
Oh, they're even making comments similar to Star Wars all over again. And then I noticed today on Twitter, my timeline, it was constant Tron Ares posts with people I've never heard of, I've never interacted with. Nothing. It was just Tron Ares, and it was like it seems like they're being boosted or something to try to. I bought tickets to go see it 3 times today in IMAX. It's like as soon as somebody says that something positive about it, it was being boosted. It was weird.
Huh, gee, well, let's look here. You saw these posts on October 10th, the day the film premiered. This was the exact day a lot of people were going to see this movie, and what do you think they're gonna do on social media after they see a movie? That's right, probably post about it and say whether they liked it or didn't like it. I know, right? What a mind-blowing concept. I just find it so funny that Clownfish TV can't possibly fathom there would be any positive comments on Tron Ares whatsoever, that they have to act like all these tweets that came out the day the film premiered are just bot accounts and that clearly people don't actually like this movie. Clearly these are just people being boosted, right? Right? Holy crap, you guys are really putting the clown in Clownfish TV here.
Yeah, there's some high strangeness around this. I'm wondering if the programs are coming into the real world here and wrecking havoc.
Oh yeah, it's real strange to see people getting excited about a movie they just saw in theaters and posting about it. Not like that happens all the time. No way, this is just a new occurrence. I think the saddest part about this is that these guys have been on Twitter since 2009, yet they don't seem capable at all of understanding what an algorithm is. When something is new or trendy or has just come out, yeah, the algorithm is gonna push that. You think you guys supposedly being people that report on pop culture news would know that, but nope, I guess not.
Because the story doesn't make sense. There's a lot of loopholes, and it was like the story's just weird. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, because the first 2 films about a programmer and his son getting sucked into a computer world full of religious allegories for both Christianity and Buddhism is totally normal and not weird. What? I wonder if these guys even paid attention to the themes of Tron and Tron Legacy since they claim they watched both. By the way, if you'd like to see me do a video about the religious representation in Tron, since that's a very interesting topic in of itself, comment down below.
It's so the toxic positivity surrounding it is unbelievable.
Oh yeah, clearly people posting about liking a film they just saw as toxic positivity. No way, that can't be anything else. They're totally wrong for liking the movie. Get real. The jokes just write themselves with these 2 self-described clowns.
Right? Because I mean,
well, yeah, you're not allowed to you can't artificially, downvote something, but you can artificially upvote something, and that's fine.
This feels very much like when you attack a cartoon show and then they have an army of stans. I understand there's a very dedicated base of Tron fans. I mean, I don't know if I would consider myself.
Tron.
I love Tron too.
One. But I mean, I'm still, kind of. I literally I really love Tron. But I'm not gonna say something's good when it's, it was visually pretty, but it wasn't like that great of a movie. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was very mid. So that being said, I think the amount of unsolicited positive comments is disproportionate to the amount of interest I'm seeing from the general public for this movie. You're not allowed to say anything negative about it. It does feel like when these cartoon stands go on a tear and they're trying to stamp out any negativity online. I think anything that could potentially ruin the Tron franchise or whatever, but this feels like there might be a marketing firm or something behind
There's something behind it, because they're like immediately going out. As soon as you said anything, then there are all these accounts you've never seen them before coming in.
Yeah. I've had a bunch of my comments too, and I'm like, all I was saying was we went to go see it at 4:00 on opening day, and there's literally nobody else there. And we've gone to see other nerd movies at this theater, and they're always
at the same
pretty
time.
full.
And then we were looking ahead at the people booking to go see it at this theater and like much bigger theaters, and the bookings weren't great. That's all we said. Now, is it going to do great? I don't know. It might. It didn't do great at previews, 4.8 million. It's okay. You know, it's not the worst. It's not the best. And it's like, you know, if people like it, you're allowed to like it. Like, we're not telling you can't like it because the visuals are pretty good.
Oh, right. Clearly you're not telling people they can't like this movie at all when you're labeling any positive comments about it as quote-unquote toxic positivity. Not really sure how there's much of a nuanced conversation going on there. Oh, but don't worry, guys. You can like this movie, but if you post about it on social media, you're toxic. I find these two clowns both ridiculous and hilarious. Oh, also, here comes my starring part in this totally not biased video here.
They're trying to make it about this. You're gonna have to read it because my screen's too small.
Racism. They're trying to make it about racism.
Oh, here we
again.
go. It said you really aren't even trying to hide the. You have to read it.
The grift. Huh? Hold on. Shameful. Okay, Greta Lee is getting a lot of hate for being Eve Kim in this film. Starting to remind me of a certain situation from about 8 years ago with another Disney sci-fi movie involving an Asian actress. You were already calling Eve Kim the new Rey Skywalker and Tron Ares, were they? I haven't seen that.
Apparently, one
anywhere.
person did in a comment or something.
Long before the film had released, you're not fooling anyone with the grift.
But they're already starting to be like, oh, it's because of racism and you hate Asians. I'm like, I actually said, if you go back to my comment, I was like, we're not doing this.
Gee, it's almost like I saw this deleted tweet from Dispardo where he called Greta Lee a Panda Express girl boss and realized that's exactly what was going on here. Also, a lot of the other comments I've seen in YouTube comments talking about her race as well. Gee, I wonder why I would compare it to how Kelly Marie Tran was treated during The Last Jedi. It's a total mystery. These guys are just so funny to me because I ended up quote posting Geeky Sparkle's post about that and showing the exact screenshots of people being racist about Greta Lee. And what do you know, she didn't have anything to say about that after. Shocker. Overall, these anti-woke reviews of Tron Ares are very clearly in bad faith. If you do want to see some good reviews on the other side of the Tron Ares discourse that aren't as positive as mine, I have a few to recommend here. Specifically, I probably recommend checking out Red Letter Media's video and also Dan Murrell's. They weren't as big on the movie as I was, but they actually gave real reasons as to why and talked about specific gripes they had with the film that didn't just involve the fact it has an Asian woman in it. But that's unsurprising given those two channels are actual film critics, unlike all the people I just discussed. Overall, if you're gonna review a movie, you should actually be looking at the storytelling, pacing, characterization, cinematography, and all the things that I talked about in my review and the things that they do in theirs. The grifters inevitably just failed to realize that and simply complain there's an Asian woman in here, and also for some reason sidestep Jared Leto, which I think is pretty telling. But what do you think? Do you plan to see Tron Ares, or do you plan to skip this film? Let me know in the comments below. If you like this video, be sure to give it a like and also consider subscribing as well. I do a lot of videos like this overall about film and animation, so if you like this video, you'll probably like the other videos I have planned as well. I'm currently working on a video about autism representation in anime and also talking about Chainsaw Man Resi Arc when that film releases, so stay tuned for those two videos. Also, shameless plug, I'll be at the Portland Retro Gaming Expo on October 18th talking about mental health representation at gaming at my very own panel. So if you're attending that convention and want to see in-depth discussions on the mental health rep and things like American McGee's Alice and Persona, feel free to check that panel out. I'll be hosting that on Saturday at 3 p.m. Special thanks to all my patrons and YouTube members who are listed right here and helping me do what I do here. And I appreciate you for coming to the end of this video. Hope you enjoyed it or learned something new from it. But for now, I've been Otterly Noah, and I'll see you on the other side. Bye!